Welcome to the Tintri Intelligent Infrastructure Webcast. I'm Clay Ryder. In this webcast, we will explore how intelligent infrastructure can provide a different experience for your VDI environment and save you up to 95% of your administrative time. Today, we will hear from a guest expert, offer some additional resources for your benefit, and have an open Q&A session at the end. If you'd like to ask your question during the presentation, please enter it into the Q&A or chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll queue it up for discussion later in the program. Without further delay, I would like to welcome our guest, Rob Girard, to the webcast. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Clay. Thanks for having me today.
Well, thank you for being here today. Please tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, first and foremost, I am a geek, have been all my life. My history prior to Tintri was infrastructure architects, administrator roles, primarily at financial firms, insurance companies, the like that. Lots to do with virtualization. Got my VCP back in 2005 and have been heavily into virtualization since. I actually became a Tintri customer in early 2012 and ran on VM stores for a couple of years. That was a pretty awesome experience. I had 5 by the time I left there. And when I left, it was to move to California to join Tintri. And so I've been at Tintri since early 2014 in the role of tech marketing engineer. In this role, I'm fortunate enough to have a pretty sweet lab setup where I get to go through a lot of stuff, work on white papers, work with customers, work with partners, speak at various events. I've spoken at the past, I think it's 7 VMworlds now. And anyway, I'm thrilled to be here today and thrilled to talk about some VDI stuff.
Well, thank you, Rob. One challenge faced by data centers is the ever-growing demand for IT services, which is essential for business success. In many cases, organizations have embraced virtual desktop infrastructure as a more efficient means by which to deliver applications. Yet, ironically, the success of VDI is now proving to be a challenge to IT, given the growing demand to deliver more services to more users. Rob, is it a case that too much VDI isn't a good thing?
Well, I think much of anything can be a bad thing. That said, I liken VDI and the starts of VDI to this pot of chili here. So we start out with a pot of chili. This is your infrastructure. And what we do is we add some desktops in there. There always seems to be a lot of space to add a few desktops here and there. And 1, 2 VMs here, 1, 2 there. Don't seem to make any difference. And we just increase the efficiency. So as we're sprinkling in those desktops and the spices in the case of this chili, it seems to get better and better. More efficiency, our dollar per VM is going down. We're maximizing all the infrastructure that we have. And so we continue to add desktops. And what tends to happen is that as we add more, things just get better and better until it's not. And in the case of this chili, we don't have a meter on spice, and we've added it, and it seems great. And then all of a sudden we hit the breaking point where it's way too spicy, tastes terrible, and it just burns. So you need to know when to start a new pot of chili, and you need some intelligent tools to let you know in your infrastructure when you need to add more resources of a certain type.
Well, it sounds like this pot of chili would cause more indigestion than gastronomic satisfaction. Well, Rob, given that we still need to deliver IT services and so many organizations have made strategic investments in virtualization, what can be done?
Well, on the VDI side of things, first of all, moving to VDI, I think is a good move. So getting away from the standalone desktops, laptops, where all the data seems to reside, and move so that all the apps and data reside inside of desktops, and not just desktops, but streaming applications through things like XenApp and other technologies from Citrix and VMware and others, cloud-based. And so the desktop itself is where your users will land on, and that's sort of their home base. And so the benefits to doing so are definitely management. So it is easier to manage than having a fleet of desktops, laptops out there that can get stolen, have to be re-imaged, have different issues with them. We can see them all in one place for the reason that they're all tucked in our infrastructure. From a performance standpoint, they're now local to the data, which is a big help. So being close to these files that you might download into a desktop is certainly going to be beneficial. On mobility, you go into a doctor's office, doctor logs into the terminal that's sitting there, pulls up your chart. More often than not, that application, whether it's Epic or one of the other medical systems, has your X-rays and has your results from tests and your chart and everything on it, and they'll go in there and then off they go to see the next person. And every time their instance is following them around. So that mobility just couldn't happen if you had to sit and wait for the new log-on. Doctor comes in, log the nurse out, and log back in. So this is a nice feature of VDI, of course. Cost savings. This was harder to justify in the past when the total cost of all the infrastructure was more than it is now. But I think it's safe to prove now that and you still needed some kind of connectivity in. So lower cost things like Chromebooks and stuff really help, and you can put the savings from that into the infrastructure to have more aggregate compute and storage and graphics power that can be used by whoever needs it very elastically. And protection and security is important. If somebody has a desktop stolen, there might be concerns of data breach. This is going to stay inside of the data center. We can disable things like port redirection and local drives, and you can't transfer files and can't pull files out and can't put in USB sticks to drop in rootkits, etc. So helpful there.
I see. So in one way, what you're saying is sometimes there's a need to think outside of the box and consider options that may not have been previously considered by IT. What are some of the common approaches today, and what might be a different approach? And what are the pros and cons of each with respect to implementing VDI?
Well, let's take a look at those 4 areas that I outlined earlier. So we've got manageability, performance, value, and protection. So if we were setting out to do virtual desktop infrastructure, and we've got our standard infrastructure approach in our mindset because that's the way we've done things, and the new element might be the VDI, but we've got some virtualization and we've been doing data center stuff a long time. So we really start to look at that standard infrastructure. And what I'd like to do is challenge that standard infrastructure. And when we're looking at things, these are the things that typically come up when you are looking through the mindset of that standard infrastructure. So for one, the infrastructure itself is complex to deploy. It needs to be set up correctly, first deployment. It may be very difficult to change things after the fact, especially if it's with SANs that, you have disk groups and LUNs and volumes that sit on top. You may not be able to move those freely after the fact. There's a lot of knobs to turn to tune it just right in a lot of different areas. If you look at VDI best practice guides from a lot of the standard infrastructure vendors out there, these are very lengthy documents that are heavily focused on just getting the storage correct. So this is where, on the performance side, it has to be tuned right to handle some of the things that come up. And so these things are boot storms and antivirus scans, noisy neighbors where one VM comes up and impacts others. Or while you're rebooting all the VMs, maybe there's no users on them because they're not logged in yet. However, there are other users in other VMs, and there is other infrastructure that gets impacted by that. And so those have to be carefully separated out in order to not have that. And that leads to over-provisioning, a lot of over-management. Tiering is important because the economics on it. And often we tend to focus on a dollar per gig type of conversation here. On the protection side, we have things like high availability. That's, I would say that's table stakes for enterprise infrastructure that, of course, it's going to have seamless upgrades and failovers that aren't going to be impactful. We can protect with, LUN level type of snapshots. Encryption would be something that you'd expect in there on standards, and then you get into all the zonings and the ACLs and stuff.
Quite often people tend to go with what they know, especially if they believe it is working for them. Perhaps more accurately, it worked for them in the past. But I'm sure we're all familiar with the statement, past performance does not guarantee future results. What is a different approach to solving this challenge, and what could provide a different user experience?
Well, I'd like to introduce everyone to intelligent infrastructure. So we did not coin the term. This is it's a term that's been around for a while, but I will argue that our Tintri VM stores really meet the definition of what intelligent infrastructure is. And we've designed something very purpose-built to make your lives easier. And one of the things that we do very, very well is VDI mixed with all those other virtualized workloads. And so from a manageability perspective, we've made it much simpler by making that unit of measurement the thing you care about, which are those desktops, the VMs themselves. So it's not a matter of finding a mapping to see if this VM, what LUN it was on, and if that LUN had any noticeable impact, if you've got the granularity of metrics to even get all that far. This is very simple. We've got this single pane of glass where it's an auto discovery of all of these VMs in here. They all become units of measurement. They all bubble up into a nice single pane of glass. Our Tintri Global Center can manage it and monitor up to 64 VM stores. So that's tens of thousands or even over hundreds of thousands of VMs in a single TGC deployment. And then we've got this long-term trending and analytics taken from very granular data down at the vDisk and VM level so that we can see how that performs in your environment and let you model things like, hey, I've got 1,500 VDI. I'm going to be acquiring this other company. It's 300 users that we're going to add to it. We can model that in, see if it's going to fit, how it fits, just using our existing 1,500 as a baseline there. So on the performance side, the ability to just throw more of these desktops in here and know that they're not going to be stepping on toes of others is very powerful. So we've got this performance isolation that is done because we have a purpose-built file system. We built it from the ground up to support virtual workloads. So I'm often asked, yeah, but what's that based on? Is that EXT? Is that a ZFS? No, it's a Tintri file system. It's very proprietary, very purpose-built for this. And into that, we've put in all kinds of counters in the flash blocks to do things like that performance isolation, to put VMs into their own queues so we can separate I/O from one another, and so that we can measure and monitor the individual I/O latencies for each of those so that we can apply our auto QoS to make sure it's fair in the environment. And by fair, it doesn't even have to be spread equally. If we've got VMs that are used to doing more workload than others, they will have higher reservations and higher reserves automatically. And if they don't use too much, they'll use less. And when it comes time to a time of contention, let's say a big boot storm and you throw everything at it and all the ones you're rebooting want as much as they can get, all of the existing ones will not be impacted by that. And if they aren't impacted by it, our latency visualization will break it down to host network storage. So there's a good chance that storage, we did the right thing and isolated the existing workloads from those ones rebooting. But there still could have been flooded networks, and there still could have been a lot of CPU challenges on the hosts, because that is an expensive task to do that. And then we've got top contributors, which I'll show in the next graph, which make it really easy to see your performance and see the exact whodunit of how people are being impacted. From a value perspective, we made it very simple with simple gauges to see where you're at with your infrastructure on whether or not you need to add more. We've expanded this to have Tintri Global Center with our Scale-Out product be able to analyze and show where different VMs should belong to get the most economics out of it. We've got drive-by-drive expansion, so you don't need to over-provision. All of your holdbacks are taken out right away, and as you add a new drive in, it's an instant operation. You get the space right away. Off you go. And then as you're running out of space and you start to ask yourself, hey, what's using all my space? This is incredibly hard in an all-flash world. Because we get dedupe and compression, we may see that our array gives us a, say, 3x space savings factor. And we could look at the data sheet for a VM store and say, hey, your data sheet showed 5x, which is what we do show as a market average. Mileage does vary, and in this case, you're getting 3x. So why aren't you getting 5x? We can look at every single VM, sort it by a list of space savings, right away find out which ones are driving that number down, the ones that are not getting in compression and dedupe, and usually the ones that are like a 1.0, 1.1x space savings, those are holding compressed video files, there are surveillance data type of stuff. They bubble right up to the top so you can see why they're costing you more. And then from a protection standpoint, in addition to what you would expect as protection, high availability, and everything else, we can snapshot per VM, and not only is that powerful at a per VM level, but from a space efficiency, it means that we don't have to capture the churn of everything else. It also means that we can recover just those desktops without having to impact others, and we don't have to lock all that snap data while we're recovering something. We've got external key management, so if you've got a secure VM and encryption on your VM store and someone goes in your data center to steal it, again, they're not stealing the desktop off the desk or a laptop. Because it's VDI, we've pushed it into our data center. Now they got to, steal the whole kit. So they take out a, 2U VM store. That thing is a paperweight if they can't connect over the network and authenticate to the key management server you've set up. And then one more thing I'd like to add on a protection side around security is that per VM activity. Having this granular per VM activity is really helpful for, like, let's say that a desktop gets ransomwared and you can't get into that to see your event logs. Now, what happened and when did it happen? By looking at I/O activity going backwards, we can actually come and find the point that is most likely the point when this happened. That will help guide us on when to roll snapshots back to. And anyway, all of it together just makes life much easier. And trying to operate without this intelligence, it would just be really hard in stark contrast to, the before and after type of thing.
Oh, interesting. It seems that intelligent infrastructure views the solution from a completely different perspective, in that it's VM-centric as opposed to storage capacity-centric. And that would seem to align better with the unit in question, which, after all, is the virtual machine or a virtual desktop. How does intelligent infrastructure fundamentally change the VDI equation in today's data center?
Well, let me try and explain that in a picture. It might be simpler here. So, apology if this is difficult to read, but what we have here is a screenshot from a Tintri VM store UI, and we're looking at VM store level, so the appliance level, array level graph. And on the top of it, we have I/O, and on the bottom, we have latency. So this was a 4-hour window where I was running some login VSI tests. And so what this is doing is simulating all your users jumping into Office products, doing a bit of browsing, and using each of their desktops. So this is kind of as real as it gets without having real users to go and create individual workloads that are all unique to one another. And what has happened here is, as more and more logged on, we can see that all of a sudden the latency started to grow. Now, that latency is broken down in colors. The green is host latency. The yellow is network. So that's the network from the host to get to storage. And then the storage itself is, the blue is the flash, and then purple is contention. So that is if we have any auto QoS in play where maybe a noisy neighbor is coming in, or maybe a lot of these are noisy neighbors compared to the established VMs, they may be getting a piece of that. But what's interesting here is that this average here, this is an average at the VM store level. So where I've clicked on the right in the graph, which is on the right side, we'll see the top contributors at that point in time. So we can see exactly which VMs are driving those IOPS. And down below, we can see the top contributors there and the latency they're getting. And so if you can't see the y-axis, it's going up to 14. And at the point where I clicked, it's at 10 milliseconds. Even at that 10 milliseconds, the storage side of it is probably 1 millisecond, looking at it right here. So even that 1 millisecond average doesn't mean that everybody's getting 1 millisecond. And as we can see on the right, we've got VMs that are, one of them's at 48 milliseconds, another's at 43 milliseconds. And on standard infrastructure, if you were to look at it and say, hey, is this a storage problem? What you would look at is that number at the bottom that would be that 1 millisecond average, say, nope, storage is clear. Now, what we're telling you is that storage is pretty good, but we have a breakdown for every VM we can drill into. But what we're seeing is that, no, there's some people that actually have it kind of bad. So that justifies that person that said it was slow. Yep, okay, our infrastructure tells us, yeah, you were having an infrastructure problem, and it's primarily host related. So in this particular case, there were too many VMs on one particular host, and they weren't spread out appropriately. So this is what can help drive better economics in the rest of the environment. So in this case, to mitigate, if this is normal usage and you're seeing this host latency, adding another host may be the solution here. It also means that you can use this as feedback to know whether or not you need to add another host. If you add more and more VMs and you're not seeing any negative byproducts of that through host latency, then you should be good to go to keep going. And so this is sort of an easy button to show you and line up with the rest of your infrastructure, what it's telling you.
Great. Would you share with us some real-life examples of how intelligent infrastructure has changed the delivery of IT services?
I got many examples myself. As I mentioned, I was a Tintri customer. And as a customer, I was really excited that my storage was in line with what I was trying to do, which was virtualize my environment, full stop. And so this was in 2011 in this particular environment where I was planning it out. And I don't even remember hitting the Tintri booth at the VMworld, but apparently I did, and they called me, and okay. So I took a call, and I thought, hey, this sounds kind of interesting. Anyway, I ended up going forward with it, and before I left, I had 5 in there, 5 different VM stores. Now, the thing for me that I was looking forward to was jumping in all those graphs and troubleshooting. But what I found was I didn't even have to log in very much because things just worked. They were just smoother across the board. Now, my own personal experience, I've heard from customers all over the place. So on screen, we've got Luke from MetaBank telling us that, by running on Tintri, the VDI performance no longer suffered from what the SQL and the Exchange boxes were doing. He's running them in the same place. They deployed it, eliminated resource conflicts, latency dropped, and user trouble tickets dropped. We've also got Don from Edward Elmhurst Healthcare that is saying something very similar. In his case, it was getting very complex. The costs were going up, multiple vendors. So it was getting very difficult to manage. Tintri comes in, boom, nice and simple, no lags, no latency, off he goes.
Well, it sounds like these customers have experienced a different result from what they were accustomed. What are some other ways that Tintri's intelligent infrastructure has changed user expectations?
So more quotes saying, hey, I love this stuff. Lots of performance, no more performance bottlenecks. And I really love this one here from LifeNet Health because this is helping staff save lives. And in a time like right now, the last thing that we need our healthcare professionals worrying about is our slow desktops and, or people that are now working from home that aren't used to it, having difficulty just to be productive and do their thing. So we want your organizations, your users to go out, save lives, be productive, and not have to worry that the back-end infrastructure, and you as the infrastructure professionals can help them do that by ensuring that they're going to have successful path to do so. And one of the ways to do that is by running your leveling up your game and running your stuff on intelligent infrastructure.
Well, thank you, Rob, for highlighting how intelligent infrastructure delivers a different VDI experience compared to standard infrastructure. For those who'd like to learn more, what would you recommend?
First of all, Tintri is something you really got to experience. I can claim up and down that, oh, these graphs are great, and it's so simple, and you just put it in and it just works. But you really won't get a grasp of it unless you experience it yourself. So one of the quickest, easiest way just to get a flavor for it is go to explore.tintri.com. And here we've got a simulated UI and some simple tasks. And you can, hopefully these tasks somewhat resonate with what you do in your environment. And you can see in that mock environment how, hey, this could be helpful. But beyond that, I would encourage everyone to schedule a live demo with an expert. We've got plenty of people at Tintri that'd be more than happy to jump on a Zoom session with you, talk about your infrastructure needs, where your pain points are, and articulate how we can help with that. So reach out on our website and get yourself a demo. I've got a more in-depth blog series that I started on intelligent infrastructure. The first two parts get into file system and analytics. I'd encourage you to read those on our blog. They were just posted last week, so nice fresh material. And then tomorrow, very specific to VDI, is Login VSI's VDI Performance Summit. So this is their second annual. If you weren't aware of it, go to VDIPerformanceSummit.com, register. And I did not demo in today's webcast. However, I will be demoing a small 15-minute session at 9:30 Pacific time tomorrow as part of Login VSI's Performance Summit. Also, we'll have a booth there, a virtual booth. It's free to register. Come by the booth. I'd be happy to chat with you. And, we'd love to hear about, what you're running and how we can help. And there's a lot of tips and tricks to make your VDI successful in that show tomorrow. That's all the industry experts there. So highly recommend that.
It's now time to open it up for your questions. So if you'd like to ask Rob a question, please enter it into the Q&A or chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll allow a little time go by to collect questions and get them queued up. One question that I often get asked is, can we get a copy of the slides? And absolutely. We'll provide you with the slide deck as well as replay information should you wish to share this webcast with your colleagues. And that'll come to you in a follow-up email probably within the next 24 hours or so. Okay, our first question is a general one, but probably on the top of a lot of folks' minds is there any difference with VDI between like Microsoft and VMware and Citrix, or is the use of intelligent infrastructure applicable in any VDI environment?
On a Tintri VM store, we support the major hypervisor platforms. So we support vSphere. We even support vSphere 7, which goes GA tomorrow. And our GA release yesterday has support for that. So we have day one support for vSphere 7. Plus we support vSphere 6 and 5, and even 4 works. However, even VMware technically doesn't support that anymore. Hyper-V 2016, 2019, support Zen Server, Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization. So the major platforms. And then in terms of the VDI that you're running on top, whether that's Citrix, VMware, Microsoft solutions, do I have a favorite? That's like asking me, hey, which one of your kids is favorite? I mean, the pros and cons on both. They're all great. Citrix has been out doing this longer than most. They've, their solution is very mature, as are the others. But I guess if I had to have a favorite, it might be Citrix PVS. I just love the way that image management works on that. How it can roll back those versions. There's a lot of control in other places, but really, they're all fantastic. They'll all work on here, and you could even mix and match them, because the value on the Tintri VM store side of things is that all these VMs are going to come in. You're going to see them in a single pane. Let's say that you started with one and you were migrating to another. You can still have those in one pane of glass to see, hey, are they doing well? Yes, no. And go from there.
Another question asks, if they have a NetApp implementation today, could a Tintri VM store live alongside it for an expansion?
Yeah, so you've got an existing infrastructure. Most people aren't out buying greenfield these days. And so all you really need is some networking, some 10 gig, 25, 40 gig. You can put a VM store in, you can attach it to your host. So even if those hosts have fiber channel storage on them today, I'm sure they've got networking on them. If not, throw a NIC in it that's got your 10, 25, 40 gig networking, and another data store shows up. And then just start moving all those VMs in. And what you'll see is that they will run awesome inside the VM store. You will have more visibility than you've ever had. And in some cases, you might be moving off slow storage to find out, hey, it's also slow in VM store. And VM store tells you that, hey, it's the network path to the storage. And that other storage that's been there all along could have been so much better if the networking were straightened out. So yes, definitely put it in alongside. But at some point, I think I'm sure you'll fall in love with it so much that you can just start moving more and more over, and then eventually get rid of your other storage.
All right, thanks everyone for your questions. I wanted to let you know.
One more question just popped in here. That was, can a VM store be a backend storage platform for a Dell vSAN? So yes, Dell vSAN. You can have that environment out there. You've got your vSAN data store. You can also have a Tintri data store. And if there are ones in there that are causing you some pain, or you want to experience differently, you can mix and match and in that method and layout as well.
Okay, very well. The next topics we're going to explore in our ongoing Intelligent Infrastructure webcast series will include protecting against ransomware, SQL integrated storage, and proactively using analytics. Thank you all for your questions. Our time together is coming to a close. I'd like to thank today's guest, Rob Girard, Principal Technical Marketing Engineer for Tintri.
Thank you, Clay. I appreciate you having me today.
As well as all of you in the audience for participating. Remember to check out the other resources we've discussed, and if you have any further questions, please contact your local Tintri representative. Be sure to join us next time when Tomer Hagai will talk with us about how intelligent infrastructure can help you protect against ransomware. For all of us at Tintri, I'm Clay Ryder. Thanks for participating. I hope you found this time to be well spent.